And welcome back to another episode of the Better Than I Found It podcast. I'm Mike McGraw, the men's golf coach at Baylor. Today's guest is former Baylor golfer Hunter Shattuck. Now, Hunter's story is so intriguing to me. He's always achieved more than people thought he would. His improbable journey to Baylor is definitely worth the listen today. In 35 years of coaching, certain players' stories sort of stand out, and Hunter's is certainly one of those stories. Also joining the interview today is McLennan Community College golf coach Vince Clark, who really gives good perspective on Hunter's development before he got to Baylor. I sure hope you enjoyed this episode. I know I did. Welcome back to Better Than I Found It. I've got a special guest today. In fact, several special guests today. But Hunter Shattuck, former Baylor golfer, former McLennan golfer, former legend in East Texas. Hunter, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Coach. Glad to be here. And sorry for the background noise. We got some dogs barking and birds and everything. Sorry about that.
Well, that's all right. It's nature. That's great. And I've also invited a former Better Than I Found It podcaster and your former coach at McLennan, Vince Clark. Vince, welcome back.
Thanks for having me on here. Hello, Hunter. How you doing?
Good, Vincer. Good to see you.
Ooh, I can't wait for this reunion. This is good. I like this. But no, Hunter, I think you are a very unique story in college golf. And for a while now, I've been thinking about your story relative to this podcast and how we could make this happen. Your story's not only unique, it's really inspiring. So I might say a few good things about you today, if you're okay.
I can handle that.
But very unique story. And I think Vince can speak to that here in a bit when we talk about the McLennan years. But your success in golf did not come early, as I recall, from what you told me. Talk to me about how you got in the game, where you grew up, what course you played at, all the influences. Just talk to me about early golf for you.
Yeah. Okay. So, golf in Jacksonville, Texas isn't glamorous. Kind of how I got started in the game. You'll know this. My parents were divorced when I was really young, and so I'd see my dad on Wednesdays, and so we would go to the golf course, and that's how we'd spend time together. We'd go play 9 holes on Wednesday afternoons after school, and that was pretty much the extent of my golf until probably middle school. I don't think I could break 100 by the time I got to 7th grade. I moved to a private school in 7th grade. Golf coach there talked me into playing on the team in middle school. We'd like get together and practice and stuff. I started playing in junior tournaments at about 8th grade. Again, was maybe scratching the 90s. My freshman year of high school, this was the big number. I averaged that year 89.7. I broke 80 for the first time in a tournament. I think at state that year, I shot 77 in the last round of state, which is sad. We made it to state with those kinds of numbers. Think about that.
Wow.
But yeah, so golf did not always come, well, it never came easy, but really didn't come easy then.
Okay, so we've gotten you to high school, and you're basically shooting 80 pretty well into your high school career. And yes. Take me back to a day, your very first big tournament, where you were a little late for your tee time. Talk to me about that. I want to hear this.
So I kind of got accidentally put in the wrong group, I think. So I had just moved up in age division in those NTPGA little one-day tournaments. You know what I'm talking about?
Sure.
And I shot like 88 in the first one, but there were 5 people in the field, so I finished second. So I got a lot of points, and so I got put in the feature group for the next event. I was with all the big names, and in East Texas junior golf, huge names. And I was playing at a course called Eagles Bluff, which turned out to be my home course in high school, so which makes this even worse. And I started on 16A, and I didn't know this, but 16 tee box was about as far away from the golf shop as you could get. And there was a shortcut through the trees, but I didn't know that. I'd never been here before. I was there by myself. I rode with a friend. And so I took off walking. I figured, well, I'll just walk past 18, then I can go down 17. I'd be at 16. No big deal.
That's deductive reasoning. I like that.
Yeah. Yeah. Simple, right? Well, I didn't know this, but there's about a quarter-mile walk between 17 and 18 and between 16 and 17. Okay. So keep in mind, I think I'm 14 years old at the time. I'm about 5'6", 185 pounds. I was out of breath by about 50 yards of walking. And so it takes me all of 30 minutes to get to my tee box. And I get there, I'm walking down, backwards down 16 fairway, and I see these two guys, and, one of them was Austin King, who's now one of my best friends. And so we tell the story all the time, but I walk back and I say, "Hey, you got 16A," and I'm, I'm huffing and puffing and everything. And he's like, "Yeah, man, go back there and tee off." Okay, cool. Well, I topped my tee shot. I think I ended up making a quad and shooting 90, I think, which is pretty solid after starting with a quad after, walking a half marathon to get to my tee box. So that was not my best day.
Well, but if I could, you've painted a nice picture of a kid that probably wasn't going to play college golf. So,
No.
I mean, that trajectory was not yours. You did not look like you were a guy that was going to play college golf at any level. So I need to know, at what point did that flip in high school where you actually thought, "Hey, I'm going to play college golf"? When did this happen?
Well, so I guess it was probably my sophomore year of high school. I gotten to be pretty good friends with another junior golfer out at my home club named Cameron. And he and I would play 36 or 54 holes every day during the summer. Neither of us had a life, and we both lived right there on the golf course. So we would just meet out there about 9 o'clock in the morning in our golf carts and just, play till the sun went down. And you do that enough, you accidentally get better. And I think it was by golf season my sophomore year, I was consistently breaking 80 on little East Texas golf courses. And then about a year later, I started playing some Legends junior events and not really competing in those, but, shooting scores under 80, which was, kind of big for me. But yeah, I think it was because I never really did lessons or anything until I think almost between my junior and senior year of high school, if I remember right. And so it was just getting out there and playing a bunch of holes, really.
So at that point, did you think
how I learned to score?
At that point, did you think maybe I will play college golf? I could at some place?
Yeah, I think so. It's really hard for me to remember, to be honest with you. I think that was the thought probably around the time I started shooting in the 70s every now and then. At the age of about 15, I was competing in the little one-day junior events, and I was like, you know what, I might be all right at this thing. And my high school coach had actually coached a few college golfers, and so he was probably the one that pushed me the most to try and get better. So
Vince, come in here right now. I need to know when you discovered this guy.
So, Hunter, I got a letter from your dad, and I get those kinds of emails all of the time. And obviously this man was so very proud of you, and he really was impressed he was very impressive in terms of just his love and his pride for you and your game. And he wanted me to meet you. He didn't ask me to take you on. All he wanted was just to meet you. Then I remember getting an email from you that was actually very humble. Your dad did a whole lot better job of selling you than you did. The one thing I do remember, you're talking about your high school golf, and even at the age of 15, how important are golf clubs? That's pretty essential, isn't it?
Yes.
A golfer should never be without their golf clubs. Do you agree with that?
Yes.
I don't know
where you're going with this.
Was it Van Zandt? Were you at Van Zandt?
Oh yeah. Don't bring up Van Zandt.
What happened, Hunter?
Okay, so again, I rode with my buddy Cameron I'd just gotten brand new irons, and that, as a 15-year-old kid that can barely break 80, that's a huge deal. Ping S56s, I remember those.
Nice.
And I first tournament with the brand new sticks, rode with my buddy Cameron and his mom. After the round's over, I probably shot 85, who knows. And we load up in the car and we drive home. Well, they dropped me off at my house about an hour or so away from Canton. I pop open the back hatch and I look at Cameron and said, "Hey, there are no clubs back here." Sure enough, we drove off and we left both of our golf clubs in Canton because both of us were trapped. No dad was there. His dad wasn't there. My dad wasn't there. And they were usually the ones that took the bags to the truck, when we were sitting there sulking about our 87s. So that's kind of how that usually worked. And that didn't happen that day.
So what I do is I offered a chance for you to come over and take a visit. I try to treat everybody exactly the same. So you guys came over and we did a campus tour and then arranged for you to play some golf. Do you remember that day?
Yeah, I remember it well. I was so nervous I could barely swing. Absolutely.
What'd you think of the campus?
You paired me. Honestly, I was blown away by the campus. It's gorgeous. And that was my first time ever in Waco. Waco was a little bit more underwhelming than McLennan's campus, but MCC's campus was great. And then I remember playing golf that afternoon and thinking that I was playing with guys on the PGA Tour. I was playing with Hansy, who was the best ball striker I'd ever seen in my whole life at this point. I mean,
that's Andrew Hands.
6'5" and
Andrew Hands played for us.
Yeah. And then Brandon Wilkins, who ended up being my roommate. And then Andrew Johnson, who I never got to be on a team with, who was a great player. And I was way out of my element. I didn't know what I was doing, but for some reason I did something that they liked. And Hansy and I still talk about that day. He laughs at me because I was so nervous.
You know, Hunter, you didn't hit the ball very far.
No.
But you knew where it was going. And I was so impressed by the way you managed your game. And even though you were nervous, I guess you were intimidated, but I sure couldn't tell it from the way you were playing, because you were really comfortable with yourself, with what you do. So that's sort of a trademark of yours, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so. And I think we'll probably touch on the distance thing a lot more later, but you know, kind of you mentioned that I didn't hit it very far and I was just kind of comfortable with what I did, but I think that's just because I didn't really know any better. You know, I'd have 3 woods into par 4s every now and then, and people would look at me like, how do you do that? Like, well, I don't know any better. I don't know any different. So this is what I've got to do to get in the hole. So I'm going to get it up around the green and I'll get up and down and move on to the next one. What else am I going to do? Try and hit it farther? That's not going to happen. So yeah, I think kind of like you said, Vince, it just kind of, I didn't really see another option. I just kind of had to take, I think the quote was take what I've got and then just go as low as I can with what I have. So that's what I tried to do.
That's one of the things you told me. And I still use that quote today. It's like gospel in our teams. This is the book of Hunter. And I talk about take what you've got and you go as low as you can go. Hunter, again, you're so humble, but you are really a good putter, especially clutch putter, aren't you?
I used to be. Yeah, I used to be able to putt.
How does that come to you? How do you do that?
Well, nobody likes this answer, but I honestly just kind of think about making putts. I mean, I always joked, and Coach McGraw knows this, but it's not that hard. I mean, I would always give Braden a hard time because, you know, he and I would go back and forth a lot, but he'd miss a putt. I'm like, Braden, what are you doing, man? It's not that hard. You just hit the ball in the hole. It's really not that hard. You just make putts. And I mean, obviously that's a little tongue in cheek, but I think that's a little bit of why I think I was a good putter, because I didn't overcomplicate it. And I just wanted to make a bunch of putts, and I didn't really see why you'd want to do anything else. So,
well, Vince, tell me this. I think he made a few putts while he was at McLennan, because weren't you an All-American, Hunter?
I think I was my freshman year. Vince will remember better than I do. I want to say I was second team my freshman year, but I don't think I got All-American my sophomore year.
So
but I don't remember for sure.
So I was so impressed by you that I offered you a scholarship and you took it. I don't even think you waited 30 seconds to make the decision. You just took it.
No, it was pretty easy. Yeah, it was my only offer. So yeah, you made it pretty easy for me.
And then after you signed with us, you won a very prestigious junior tournament, didn't you?
Yes. Yeah. I ended up winning the Junior Byron, which is a Legends Tour event up there at Lakewood, which I didn't know this at the time, but Lakewood is basically, you know, my happy place. And that was a good week for me. I just kind of the stars aligned, and I ended up playing great golf for 54 holes. So kind of came out of nowhere, literally out of nowhere, but it was fun.
And I started getting telephone calls like, so how did you know this guy was so good? And I actually had absolutely no answer for them at all, because his dad wrote a really nice letter. Is the only thing I could think of.
Yeah, well, he always thought I was better than I thought I was. And I think he still does. I told him, I played the other day and told him what I shot. And he was like, oh my gosh, how'd you do that? Like, that's terrible. Because he still thinks that I can play, even though I don't play anymore. But he's just always been that way.
Hunter, the fall of your freshman year, you were I think you were the top you were the top freshman in JUCO. You were top 3. You may have been the top player, as I recall. You played really well that fall and got everybody's attention. You made a lot of putts.
Yeah, I made a lot of putts that semester. And again, that kind of like the junior Byron came out of nowhere a little bit. I remember going to McLennan thinking, gosh, I just hope I can make this lineup. All these guys are so good. They hit it so much farther than I do. And I don't know what happened, but that was the best golf I had ever played by a long shot. And it never stopped. And so it was kind of a fun semester. Every time I went out, I feel like I finished top 5. And so, like I said, don't know where that came from, but I was glad it didn't stop for a while. So that was a lot of fun.
Mike, I would love to hear your thoughts on Hunter's leadership later, but because he was a great leader for us, even as a freshman. He has such an easygoing personality. He's so winsome, so affable. I've never met anybody who doesn't like Hunter Shattuck, which makes you sound like you're a saint, but you're not. So, Hunter, I need you to finish a story for me. We were playing a qualifier at Bear Ridge, and we had new owners. And back on 13, which is a kind of shortish par 4 with out of bounds on both sides, the new owners decided to pull the out of bounds stakes in close to the cart path, which narrowed the hole by 20, 25 yards. I remember walking up on the tee with you guys, and all of you were just outraged by this. Look like a bunch of mules looking at a new gate. I mean, you were just absolutely furious that they would do this. And my attitude is, like, you just have to deal with it. Let's just go play. What was interesting, though, is that by the next qualifier, I walk up on 13 and the out of bounds stakes were back out at the original position. And I said, well, boys, look, you got your wish. So it was just sort of magic, wasn't it, Hunter?
Yeah, it was. Well, we dealt with it. I think
How
the best way that we
How did you deal with it, Hunter?
Well, so we were sitting around the duplex one night and talking about how, dumb that was, that they moved the out of bounds stakes and how tough that hole is now because it's so windy right there and everything. And we thought, you know what we ought to do? We ought to just drive out there and move those out of bounds stakes. And I'm not going to say anybody that I did this with, but it wasn't just me. And so we all load up in one of the guys' trucks. I don't remember who it was. And we go out there and we move every out of bounds stake. And this is, midnight by now. And move every out of bounds stake, and they are still there to this day. So, or I guess last time I played out there, I don't know what they look like now.
I actually now consider you a course designer.
That's right. Add it to the resume.
That's really good. Well, Hunter, before we're going to get you to Baylor here in a second. Before we do that, and Vince, thank you for those questions. Hunter, I'm going to ask you a question. What makes Vince, and in the shortest possible answer, make it very concise, like this is what it is. What makes Vince a great coach?
He can create buy-in from his players better than anybody. Creating this family. It's not even just a family atmosphere; it's a family. And I don't know if he does it on purpose or if it's just the nature of everybody living together and taking classes together and doing all that. But I've never really seen a group of guys all have collective buy-in from the first guy on the team to the last guy on the team, like it is at McLennan.
That's a great answer. And actually, in my book, Better Than I Found It, I had Vince write a chapter about family because I thought it was really important. I've seen that from afar. Great to hear you as a former player of Vince's talk about that. It's really good. So you get to the recruiting process from McLennan to try to get someplace else. And Greg Priest made you an offer, didn't he?
Yeah. So I remember one day very vividly, we were sitting there hitting balls on the MCC side of the Twin Rivers range, or now it's Bear Ridge, but it's Twin Rivers to me. And Coach Priest walks around the fence and he comes over and he's talking to Vince. And we think that he's telling us to stop hitting golf balls over to the Baylor side of the range. That's what we thought. And we're sitting there like, gosh, this guy, Greg Priest, who's he think he is, telling us not to hit golf balls over there? We're just little JUCO kids with chip on our shoulder, and we'll come to find out he was talking to Vince about me. And obviously Vince can't come over and be like, hey guys, he was talking to me about Hunter. So Vince made up the story about don't hit golf balls over to Baylor side of the range. But so after that day, he gave me a call, and he tried to get me to come to Baylor after my freshman year, because that was spring of my freshman year. And I told him that I'd committed to Vince for 2 years, and I was going to stay with Vince for 2 years. And so that's what I did. And he said, well, I can offer you a spot for the following year. I'm like, that sounds phenomenal. And I think it took me a couple days just to realize that it was real. And then I committed, and I was committed for a long time. It felt like I was never going to get there. But yeah, because I committed in, I think, April of my freshman year. And so.
Okay, so 14 months later, I got hired as the Baylor golf coach, and I had 3 commitments. One was Travis McEnroe from Plano, Texas. One was Braden Bailey from Groves, and one was Hunter Shattuck from Jacksonville. And so I called all 3 players that day. And when I called you, tell me a little bit about that phone call, because we've never really talked about it. We've alluded to it, but not talked about it.
Yeah. So whenever I heard you got the job, obviously I knew who you were and your, resume and everything. And I was like, well, guess I better be looking for a new place to play, because he's not going to want anything to do with this little kid from Jacksonville, Texas. And I guess I'm, back on the recruiting hunt. And so you called me that day, and I expected to get the, hey, Hunter, you seem like a nice kid, but I'm going to go a different direction. I was like, okay, I was prepared to give you the, hey, that's great, good luck down the road and everything. But you didn't do that. You said that you planned to honor everything, and you did. And I was blown away. I remember I was about to tee off for a round just out of Jacksonville, one of my, 10,000 rounds out there. And when we were on the phone, I remember walking around the clubhouse after we got off the phone, like high-fiving everybody. And I was so excited. I could have ran through a brick wall after we got off the phone.
Well, I'm glad that it worked out the way it did. I honored all 3 commitments, and I'm thankful that I did to this day. But just a day or so later, I was at the Junior Byron Nelson, and you were caddying for one of your buddies, and that's where we actually first met. You were caddying for Reagan?
Ryan, I believe.
Yeah, Ryan Johnson.
Yeah, Ryan Johnson.
Yeah. Anyway, I met you there. And anyway, long story short, you get to Baylor in the fall of 2015, and I'm watching you hit wedges on the first day on the range, and I'm thinking, boy, that's a good golf swing. It's a nice golf swing. And then I watched you hit some 8-irons, still a nice golf swing, but wasn't going very far. And then you got to the 5-iron, and it's like there must be a pillow on his club face, because there's no way. The ball was going nowhere, and I was going, oh my gosh, I hope he putts good.
Yeah, well.
Anyway, so let's kind of tidy this up. Would you agree you didn't hit the ball very far?
Yeah, that is an understatement.
Okay.
Yes, I never played with somebody in Division I golf that I hit it further than they did.
Right.
So.
And later I talked, you actually qualified for our first 2 tournaments, which was back-to-back Minnesota and Olympia Fields. And I'm walking with Ryan Hibble from the University of Oklahoma. And he's saying, hey, I see you have that Shattuck kid in your lineup this week. I said, I do. And he goes, I've played golf with him in the U.S. whatever, amateur qualifying. And I said, oh, what'd you think? And he goes, Coach, he said he can't hit it far enough to play this level. And I said, well, you're right. He really can't, but he's here this week. And unbelievably, you finished 17th at Minnesota. I couldn't believe it. Big golf course. So you didn't know. I've never told you that. Ryan Hibble told me that. I said, there's no way this kid can play this level. Well, and then Olympia Fields kind of, what's that?
Yeah, well, he's right. I couldn't hit it far enough to compete at that level.
That's for and it really reared its ugly head at Olympia Fields, because not only did that course have a little length, but it had rough, and you just couldn't play from the rough. And I think your confidence started to wane after that tournament. And yeah, it wasn't going very well. And after our final qualifying for Royal Oaks, which the tournament got rained out, you and I had a talk. Describe that talk, because I remember it like it was yesterday.
Yeah, so I don't remember the word for word. The way that I remember the conversation, you and Coach Blagg set me down and basically told me that I don't hit it far enough to compete. I don't think you were that harsh, but that's what it sounded like to me, and right. It was hard to hear, because, here I am like, well, what do I do now? Like, I don't know how do you just instantly hit it farther? That's not easy to do. Right. And, so yeah, that conversation was tough because you basically just kind of told me what I needed to hear. And that conversation is the reason that I became competitive in college golf and then was able to at least give it a go at pro golf.
Right. Well, I remember that day very well, and you gave an exact depiction of what happened that day. But I gave you a solution that day that you didn't know existed at the time. And a former Baylor golfer named
I
Bill
couldn't remember if it was
Alcorn,
that day or not.
it was a day or two later. I'd been talking to Bill. Bill had played golf at Baylor, was trying to still play professionally. Bill would eventually become a college coach. He's at OU right now. But Bill had created a workout program that got him from 268-yard average to 294 in like 4 months. And it was like crazy. And I said, Hunter, here's what we're going to do. Bill's going to be my volunteer assistant this winter, and he's going to take any guys that want to do this program, that want to do it. He's going to do it. You don't have an option. Everyone else has an option. It's voluntary for them. You do not have an option, because the only way you're going to play golf at Baylor is to do this program and to do something special. So you averaged 239 on the TrackMan when we started. 3.5 months later, 272. And I've never seen anything like that in my life. But it wasn't just Bill's program, and it wasn't just the fact that you joined 5 of your teammates and did it 3 days a week. You came in 2 additional mornings. I'll never forget that as long as I live, at 5:30 or 6 a.m. before you went to class to get 2 more workouts in. And sure enough, that spring you were carrying the ball over 270 yards. Now all of a sudden that beautiful putting stroke is not putting for par every time.
Yeah.
He's got a chance to make a few birdies. So, but I added one other thing to this mandatory working out and changing what you did there. And it was about your self-talk. Because for a kid who's so positive in life and a kid who radiates positivity and people feel better when they're around you, I do. I know I do. I enjoyed eating lunch with you this week just to catch up, and it was just fun. But you had the worst self-talk of just about any player I'd ever talked to. Describe that, and then we're going to talk about how we got out of that.
Yeah. I truly don't know why that was an issue. Just kind of something I always did. And I mean, I don't know if I blame it on this sounds like an excuse. The group of guys that I grew up playing golf with, my dad and his buddies, they weren't exactly the most positive on the golf course, as you can imagine. And so I just kind of, when you hit a bad shot, you throw a club. That's what you do. That's how you play golf. That's what you do. And I was real harsh on myself. And I think a lot of it stemmed from being insecure about the way that I played. Obviously hitting it short's no fun. Because every group I played in, there was always, that thought of, man, do these guys think that I belong here? Which is stupid to think that, but I couldn't help it. And so it's probably stemmed from some of that, but it was a bunch of, I don't know, just telling myself I wasn't very good at golf and, I don't deserve to be here, and a bunch of terrible things, honestly. And so I remember you set me down. I can't remember if it was that day or it was sometime that off season. And you said that can't happen anymore. You said, you basically told me that you don't really care what I say to myself as long as it's not that negative. I can't have any negative self-talk whatsoever.
Yeah, I've never done that with a kid. Literally zero tolerance. You will not talk about yourself in a bad way around me. And you said one other thing that I've never forgotten. I wrote it down as we were working our way through this. You admitted, you said, well, Coach, when I heard you were going to be the coach at Baylor, I always figured you've coached Ricky Fowler and all these All-Americans, these great players, and I just didn't think you'd care much about a guy like me coming from Jacksonville, Texas, junior college kid. And I shut that down real quick. Coaching is coaching and playing is playing. And there's been plenty of guys playing the PGA Tour that played at junior college that weren't any good in high school, that didn't have, but you're destined to not be a good college player if you talk that way. You're destined to not be a good college player. If you don't think I believe in you, you got a problem. I believe in you. And hopefully together we work through that to get you to a point where, and then the distance, now all of a sudden Hunter's pretty competitive at the Division I level. It's like, that's a pretty good player. And so if we can go through the fall, get back around to the fall of 2016. So it's your second year at Baylor. You finished fourth at Mirabel out in Arizona, and we hosted a tournament at Royal Oaks, and you finished third. And I'm going to tell a story I've never told you before, never talked to you about, but so everybody had kind of dispersed after the award ceremony. We had won by 35 shots. You had finished third. You played beautifully, and you were one of the big reasons. I mean, and you are our team captain. And quite frankly, you were as good an example of a team captain, just the way you treated people. And all of that was spot on, perfect, what we needed that year. In fact, maybe the greatest team synergy I've ever had as a coach. So I know you were the author of that. But so I've gotten the score sheet and the trophy, and we're getting ready to leave. And everybody else is headed out to the van, and your dad walks up to me. And so I said, "Hey, Johnny, great going this week. Wonderful week." And he came over, he said, "Coach, I've got to say something to you." And I said, "Okay, what's up?" And he started crying. And I thought, oh, man, this guy he's a pretty tough dude now, your dad. He's not a softie. And he's crying. And I was shocked. And I said, "Are you okay?" And he goes, give me a second. I'll gather myself. And after about a minute, he gathered himself. And finally he said, "Coach, I want to thank you for the last 16 months of Hunter's life." He said, "I don't recognize him. I don't recognize my son." And I've never been paid a better compliment as a coach in 35 years from a parent or anybody really, because he was so emotional about it. And it was one, you were playing the best golf of your life, but that wasn't me. That was the hard work you had done and the teammates you had surrounding you. That wasn't me. But he noticed the different way you talked about yourself, and two, it was just a different way that you handle yourself on the golf course, and it had affected your dad in a big way. He just didn't recognize you. So I want to say that publicly here for the first time, Johnny Shattuck, that was one of the great moments I've had with a parent in my whole coaching career. Did you know that story?
I think you'd mentioned to me a while back, but it's cool to hear. And I mean, he's exactly right. I think I remember that week vividly. I remember walking around that golf course expecting to be in contention and expecting to not win, because that's, a lot, but really honestly expecting to win. I mean, I was kind of walking around that week like I belonged, and that was probably the first time that had ever happened in any golf tournament of my life. And that was pretty cool. That was a cool week.
Well, cool week for you. Incredibly cool week for me. Not the victory as much as just the reaction I got from your dad. Never forget that as long as I coach. And so we go through that year as one of the top ranked teams in the country. We make a run in match play at the national championship, lost to OU, the eventual national champion. So that had to have been an amazing experience for a kid from Jacksonville to be playing in the quarterfinals of the national championship.
Yeah, that's I tell people ask me if I miss playing golf and anything, and I'll say the only thing that I still think about is that week at the national championship. I don't think about the USAM. I don't really think about Q school. I think about that week at the national championship, and especially I remember the end of stroke play, because we were right on the verge, and I don't remember the other teams involved. I think it was Virginia, and it's not important. But I had two up and downs on the last two holes, and honestly, I thought we were out of it, because I made one of those up and downs was for bogey, and I come off the green and I'm kind of down. I'm like, man, we were so close. I thought we were going to get it. And I can't remember who it was that looked at me, but was like, "Hey, we're going to do this. All Cooper has to do is make bogey on the last hole, and we're in match play." And I start losing my mind. I mean, I'm going crazy. We're hugging each other because Cooper hits it up to like 10 feet. I'm like, okay, he can 3-putt that. And yeah, I'll never forget. Braden looked at me. We hugged each other, and we just said we did it. Like, we made match play. That was kind of the goal going into the week, was get to match play, because anything can happen. And we had all worked so hard that whole year, really, and we were the same 5 guys at every tournament. And so, it really meant a lot to all of us to really make that happen, and we knew we had that kind of golf in us. And just to kind of get over that hump to make match play was one of the coolest things I've ever been a part of.
Well, not only that, but I mean, most people don't give you credit. You were literally the greatest 5-man I've ever coached in my career. And honestly, so good that you really weren't the 5-man. You really weren't when you get right down to it. We had you in the 5th spot, but you did your fair share of finishing in the top 10 and top 5. And you were a huge reason, not just the golf that you played, which was really good, but just kind of the synergy that you always were. And like you said, your dad couldn't recognize you. You were an amazing leader. And I'm just thankful for that. So we do lose in the quarterfinals, but it was a great experience nonetheless. And you played golf that summer. And you played in your first U.S. Amateur. What happened there? You made match
Well, the
play.
USM was actually the summer before.
Oh, was it really?
It was,
okay, I missed
yeah,
that.
it was the summer before my senior year. But I had played, it was at Oakland Hills in Michigan. And it kind of another one of those situations where I was like, I don't belong here, because I played with Sam Horsfield in stroke play, who is a stud. And I remember he shot like 4 or 5 under in the first round and missed like 7 putts inside 10 feet. And I remember talking to my dad that night and thinking, how do I beat this guy? Like, how do I do this? And sure enough, the next day we go play I can't remember if it was the north or the south course. It was the harder of the two. And I went out and shot, 1 or 2 under and made match play. And I beat him that day. And it was that's just kind of the way golf works. And I remember I made birdies on 16 and 17, and then ended up making match play by a shot. And so that was really cool to, at that point, because we hadn't played match play yet at nationals, and that was the most pressure I had ever felt. And it was like, not nerves, it was pressure. That was the first time I had ever experienced like the weight of the world in the middle of a round of golf. And so it was pretty cool to be able to kind of make a couple birdies when I had to make match play under all that pressure.
You think you drew upon that? Now that I'm looking back on it, I had it out of order there in my mind. You think you drew upon that just for later in the match play at nationals?
Absolutely. And I'll kind of, make one quick point here. So something that Vince always talked about when I was playing for him that didn't really stick until later on was kind of training yourself under all that pressure and under the nerves to default into your routine. And kind of after feeling all that pressure at USAM, it made me think like, that's what he's been talking about. Like, that's what you have to do. And so I spent a lot of time working on really training my mind to go into my routine as a default setting. Like, anytime I'm ever under that much pressure or stress or nerves or anything, I just get harder into my routine. And I really think that helped not only through my senior year, but, going into Q school, playing under all that pressure, ended up playing pretty well. And I think that kind of, I don't want to say training, but, for lack of a better word, the training at USAM kind of was a big reason for that.
That's great. So we finished nationals that year. You go through the summer, you turn professional, and you go to the Korn Ferry Tour School. So I have this memory. We were following you in qualifying. We're at Ridgewood Country Club playing qualifying. Hunter's going through first stage. You made it through first stage. And Ryan Blagg said, "Hey, Coach, where is Hunter playing his second stage?" And I said, "Well, he's playing Craig Ranch in Dallas." And he goes, "Well, that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard in my life. Why would he go to a golf course that's that long? It's the dumbest thing." And I was going, well, I don't know. I guess he just signed up for it. What was the thought process about it? Was it just because it was close?
Well, okay. So 2 things. One, I hope he listens to this podcast, because I'm going to kind of shoot his theory down right here.
Please do.
But yes, the biggest reason was I couldn't afford to go anywhere else, because my aunt lived 5 minutes from Craig Ranch. And so I could stay for free. I could drive up there. She was going to cook every meal. And I was broke. I mean, I was a broke mini tour player, and I hadn't made a cut at this point. So I'd made $0 as a professional golfer. And so I couldn't afford to go anywhere else. And my second thought was, that's a really big golf course. The fairways are wide, greens are big. So as short as I hit it straight. And I'm going to be in the fairway on every single hole. I'm going to have a clean strike on every second shot. So I'm going to hit 15, 16 greens around. And my short game is so good that I'm going to make a bunch of pars, and then there's some wedges out there. I'll make some birdies. And so that was my thought process. Like, just because it's long, yeah, but I mean, it's not long and tight to where I'm going to be out of the rough from 200 yards. I mean, I can hit the green from 200 in the fairway. So that was my thought process.
Well, that's good thinking. And I didn't know that. I didn't know you were choosing it for that reason. Kyle Jones, a couple of years before, had chosen it, and he didn't hit it very far. And I remember Ryan Blagg and I criticizing Kyle, but he got through, and you got through. So I think maybe you guys are just smarter than us coaches, I'm sure.
Yeah, there's something to it.
But so we're following you at Craig Ranch from Ridgewood in qualifying, and I got it on my phone, and you shoot 64 the last round to make it through second stage.
The third round. I had to come back and shoot 2 under the last round to make it.
Okay, well, I don't have all my facts correct, but I do remember the 64. And you got to the final stage of tour school, your first opportunity out as a kid that averaged 90 as a sophomore in high school. This doesn't happen. You know that, right?
Yeah, it was a surreal moment. And I had my buddy Austin out there on the bag at final stage, and they've got the tour vans out there, and I got to go to ping the day before, or I guess a few days before the first round, to go through the whole fitting. And I think Kevin Struman was out on the range at ping, hitting balls next to me. I was like, this is weird, man. Like, just to kind of think that, kind of another one of those situations where it was, do I really belong out here? And then it was cool. That was one of the coolest weeks I've ever had.
Well,
sure.
you got status on the Korn Ferry Tour. You didn't, get full status, but you did have status for a year. Played golf for a while as a professional. But I guess the real reason I wanted to come on this podcast was not just a kid who went from averaging 90 to getting tour status, although to me that's an unbelievable story. And it wasn't just a kid who made All-American at McLennan or even got to McLennan to begin with. The whole story to me is about what a true student athlete looks like. I mean, you got your degree at Baylor. You were an amazing leader. You did everything and more than any coach has ever asked of you. I mean, you never gave us just what we asked for. You always gave us more. And people on the team were better because of you. And so I'm going to make this statement. I think Michael Jordan will always be better than LeBron because the players around Michael Jordan always got better. The players around LeBron were probably great already, and that's a layman's view of this. But you made your teammates better, and I'll always be thankful for that. You did. And you made the program better because of it. Vince, would you agree with that?
Absolutely. So you're such a great leader. Hunter, I remember the freshmen, when you were a sophomore, those freshmen followed you around like baby ducklings following their mom. They just emulated you. What do you think makes a good leader? Because you were a great leader. What do you think makes a great leader?
A lot of things. I mean, for me personally, I'm not the, rah, like everybody, let's get fired up type of guy. And so I knew that, I guess we had to work really hard at both at McLennan and at Baylor. And so I did everything I could to try and get the guys involved. I remember everything, even toward the end of my senior year, everything I did for practice, I tried to get other people involved. Hey, who wants to come play a quick nine? Or, who wants to come to this? Because I knew that if we were out there, not only were we practicing or getting better as golfers, but we were also, with the guys on the team. We weren't ever really doing anything individually. And I think that's something that's so important in a small team like a golf team is, getting the guys together. And Vince, we would do the Ryder Cup in the off season, and that was huge for us because not only were we, having a blast doing that, playing match play, but we were pulling for each other. And that got us kind of in the mindset of pulling for our teammates instead of, only doing like, we would qualify hard at McLennan, the five best scores are going regardless, no picks. And so it was pretty cutthroat there. And so to make the switch in the off season where you're actually pulling for your teammates and you're getting behind your teammates and you're celebrating everything, I think that does a whole lot more than you realize, because you get so much closer to the guys once you do stuff as a team and as a group. And then that, I don't know, for some reason it just kind of always seemed to work out because you end up getting better as a unit. And kind of like you said, Coach, you just end up playing better when you're playing for the guys. And that's what we always tried to do, I feel like.
Well, Hunter, Coach Clark and I both want to thank you for that leadership. I know it helped both of our teams while you were here. And honestly, if every college player went into it thinking, if I could add that way as well, not just the score I'm shooting, if I could add this other way in a leadership role, I think every team would be a lot better off. And the teammates that enjoy their time there more, the coaches that have an easier job, it'd all be better. So you're sort of the poster child, you're the model, you're the one I would like to say others could emulate the way you handled it. But so anyway, thank you for that. You played pro golf for a while, and at some point you decided it wasn't going to be for you, and you decided you were going to go to law school. Now, you were a good student at Baylor, but I didn't think of you as a guy that was going to be a lawyer, an attorney one day. So you make that decision. Can you give me the number? Would you feel comfortable giving me the score you made on the LSAT?
Let me see if I can remember. I took it 3 times. So my highest score, I think, was a 169, if I remember right. It was either 68 or 69, 168 or 169. I can't remember.
Well, now, Coach Clark is an attorney. Tell us how that score is.
That's phenomenal. I mean, that puts you in at the championship flight of potential law students. That's awesome.
Well, I tried to this weird thing when studying for that. I decided to actually try pretty hard. Something that I had never really done in school because I'd spent so much time focusing on golf. Both MCC and Baylor, I don't want to say I did the bare minimum because my grades were fine, but I purposely didn't do more because I wanted to spend more time at the golf course. I wanted to spend time in the evenings, talking to my teammates about, hey, how can we get better? And that sounds crazy, but I didn't really care that much about school. And then I kind of realized that, pro golf, A, I don't really know if I was quite good enough, and B, the mini tour life is not all that spectacular. And so I started thinking about, other avenues, and I started thinking about law school. And I said, well, if this is something that I'm going to do, I'm going to have to, go after it the way that I did golf. And Matthew tells me all the time, but he's like, I didn't know that you were smart. And I'm like, I didn't either. And it just kind of happened. So
who knew you were a genius? Who knew that?
Literally nobody.
Well, you've just completed your first year of law school, and you're going to be doing an internship this summer, correct?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Where will that be?
Interning for a judge here in East Texas.
Okay. Well, that'll be a good experience, and a little break from all the hard study. I'm sure you could use one of those breaks.
Yes. Yeah. This semester was brutal.
Well, what I'm going to do is one day we're going to have you back on this once you're a full-fledged attorney, and then you can school me up on anything I'm saying on here. Could I be held liable for any of this? You're going to help me with that, right?
Yeah, I got you. Yeah, for sure.
Okay, perfect. Well, this is one thing you might hold me liable for, and that is we're going to do a speed round to finish here, Hunter.
Oh, no.
So you got to answer these questions.
I'm not prepared for this.
Well, I know you're not, but just answer them. Don't even worry about what you think is the right answer. Just answer, okay?
Okay, I can do
All
this.
right, about 7 or 8 questions. Here we go. Would you rather listen to George Strait or Luke Bryan? Be careful.
George Strait. I mean, come on.
Thank you. I knew
That's
you
not
were.
even I'm insulted.
I knew you were a good human being. I just had to prove it to the world right there. Course you would most like to play but haven't played.
Oh gosh. Honestly, Dallas National. I've heard a lot of people talk about it, and so I've never been out there. I'd like to go out there.
It's a great place. I've been there one time. I love that place. Favorite course you have played?
Olympia Fields.
Yeah, isn't that nice? That's a great spot, isn't it?
It's awesome.
Chipotle or Chick-fil-A?
Chick-fil-A.
Chick-fil-A, all right.
Hands down. Yeah.
Shawshank Redemption or Remember the Titans?
Yes. I'll take them both.
Good answer. They're both
I can't
good.
choose.
All right. Best investment you've made in golf under $100?
A putting arc, and it's not even close.
Putting arc. What'd you pay for that?
$70. I had to buy another one because I lost one. As a pro, I paid $70 because I was putting so bad, and then made the cut on the number the next week and putted great. And I don't know, made a few $100, but I mean, pretty good return on investment.
I like that. That's a good investment. Okay. Favorite Coach Clark quirk?
Oh gosh.
Vince Clark. He's got some quirks. What's the favorite one?
I just saw his eyes perk up, so I better be careful here. Let's see. He names his bicycle Dollar.
He what?
I'd say his bike. Is it still Dollar? Have you gotten a new bike?
No, it's Dollar.
Yeah.
Okay, why do you name it Dollar before we go to his last question?
That's John Wayne's horse.
Oh, perfect. Okay. That's good.
Yeah.
You got to love John Wayne. You have to. All right. Final question. Favorite Coach McGraw quirk?
I mean, you sleep like a zombie. You eat too fast. You point at people all the time. It's kind of weird. I mean, how much time do we have?
I said one, but I better stop you right there. How about that? Well, Hunter, I just want to, first of all, I want to thank Vince Clark for coming back onto the podcast today. Vince, you're a great guest always. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike.
Yeah, easy to have Vince on here. He's such a well-respected coach. But Hunter, thank you so much for telling your story. I think it's unique. I don't think very many kids in college golf have been a 90 shooter as a sophomore, and been playing in the Nationals Match Play Championship when they were senior. I don't think that's going to happen again. If it does, I want to have that guy on the podcast as well. So, but thank you very much for joining us. Good luck this summer, and best of luck going forward.
Thanks, Coach. I'll get down to Waco soon and see you all again.
Come on, please do.